of urban interface. And we have some very high population densities and diverse land ownerships. What we try to do as an exchange is to catalyze collaboration between scientists and managers. And we try to facilitate communications and synthesize knowledge of what is out there about fire science in our region and what's applicable to our region. We do this through research briefs, newsletters, webinars, and our website, as well as we have a research database which links to some existing databases. And we also put on field trips, and we have capstone workshops. All this information is available on the North Atlantic Fire Science Exchange website, www.firesciencenorthatlantic.org. Just a quick snapshot of our leadership team. Nick Skoronsky is with the U.S. Forest Service. Aaron Lane is also with the U.S. Forest Service. I work for the Forest Stewards Guild, and Inga LaPuma is associated with Rutgers University. So between us, we are able to get a bit done, which is fun. But not alone. We have our wonderful community representatives who join us from many different agencies, organizations, and businesses that are active in fire science and management across our region. And without these folks, we would have very little clue of what actually goes on with boots on the ground work and in terms of management and in terms of science. So we're very thankful to our community reps who keep it real. And just lastly, here's our URL, firesciencenorthatlantic.org. And we have a wonderful community, and we look forward to offering you this webinar. So now I'm going to give the floor to Dana Hicks, who is our presenter for today. So Dana has been in the position of Fire Management Specialist, Wildfire Threat Specialist with the British Columbia Ministry of Forests, Lands, and Natural Resources operation in Prince George since 2006. During this time, he has spent his time revitalizing the fire management process in British Columbia. He has served as the fire behavior analyst on several provincial Type 1 incident management teams. During the spring of 2009, Dana was exported to Victoria State, Australia to help with their fire situation. He worked as a fire behavior analyst on the Kilmore-Murrindini fire, which burned over 260,000 hectares and killed over 130 people. He's continuing to serve as fire behavior analyst on provincial Type 1 incident management teams and spent considerable time working on the Mountain Pine Beetle Initiative and its interaction with fire. He has recently co-authored a paper dealing with fire behavior in mountain pine beetle forest fuels, and he is also, in his spare time, an instructor on several national fire behavior courses in Canada. Dana also has spent a good bit of time in the woods in Nova Scotia, and while we were preparing for this, we were chatting about spruce budworm and some of the implications for forest health and fuels and fire behavior on the eastern side of the continent. So Dana, welcome and thank you very, very much. For folks on the line, I'm going to mute the phone lines, and we can open them up at the end. If you have questions, please enter them into the chat box. So for now, I am giving the floor to Dana, and enjoy the webinar.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. I guess it's morning for me and maybe afternoon for some people. So some people it may be lunchtime. So you can enjoy your lunch while I chat along. Again, I've worked in BC now for just over 10 years. Worked for the province of Nova Scotia for 22 years previous to that. Did get to deal with a lot of the pine beetles or the spruce budworm and other insects in Nova Scotia. I guess when I came to BC, British Columbia, the pine beetle was just rising up and becoming an epidemic at that point. I'll show you a map in a few seconds of what's actually happened, but it's been eye-opening for sure from like the fire ecology side of things and a fire behavior side of things as well, and just the pure magnitude of the outbreak for sure. Just some quick facts about BC. It's about 95 million hectares or 234 million acres. So it's a large province in Canada. We have a forested area of about 60 million or 148 million acres, and the huge bulk of that is publicly owned, so it is Crown land, so a huge piece of Crown land that we deal with and make a lot of money off, I guess, from the perspective of the province. You know, 96% of the forested land is comprised of conifer species, giving us about half of the softwood inventory in Canada. So from a lumber and softwood perspective, it's a huge bank for Canada, and the pine beetle did a lot of chewing and having a lot of fun in that area and destroying a lot of timber as well. The current outbreak is saying around 723 million cubic meters killed. It's plus or minus 20 million hectares, so that's about just about 50 million acres. Again, when you come to BC and you fly over BC, you're not going to see, a moonscape of dead trees. Even though it's infested and attacked over 20 million hectares, it's surprisingly how green the forest still is. Again, when we talk about the 20 million hectares, that's anywhere from light attack to severe attack. And a lot of the areas with severe attack, there was an understory that's prospering very well. So it's not all doom and gloom. It's not a moonscape until we burn it, but it is definitely a huge loss of timber from our perspective. So to put that in perspective, the 50 million acres is more than the land mass of Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Vermont. So it's a big chunk of land, and I'll show you in a map in a second here. So again, 2005, 2006 was the peak of the attack. The attack started to, and again, it's a beetle that's been in BC forever. There's anecdotal information that big attacks in the early 1900s, but we've had previous attacks. In 1980, we lost probably somewhere around 750,000 hectares, but this one was a record breaker for sure, and still continues to be. I call it on the rim of the bowl. It still continues to grow in BC, but not at any big amount. Now, I think last year, what we call the red attack, the new attack, was about 700,000 hectares. So it's decreased considerably since 2005 and 2006. Just a graph showing you where we're at. And again, you look at it in 2005 and 2006, huge amount of timber affected, down to 2015 last year where very little timber was affected. Not sure how this graphic will show up here on your screen, but basically, get the right thing. If you look at it, it goes right up to about the 55th parallel, right down to the 49th parallel, right from the Alberta border. And we were nice enough to share it with Alberta too. We didn't want to keep them from not getting it as well. Pretty well to the Pacific Ocean. So there's a huge block of BC that shows gray there. That's areas that have been attacked. Really interesting. I live and work in Prince George in this area, and we're kind of the epicenter, or just east of the epicenter of where the beetle attack started. And it's a huge piece of land that was affected. And it should be noted that in and around Prince George, when I talked about us having half of the softwood inventory, we also produce about half of the saw logs, and lumber is produced in BC for Canada. So we're a huge producer of the softwood lumber. And if you took a 100-mile circle around Prince George, about 90% of that material would be produced in that area. So it definitely hit our timber basket, and it was a huge concern. Really interesting. Previous attacks had never gone above the 55th parallel. And again, the line up here is the 60th parallel with the territories. So, we're now seeing it in areas here that it's at the 58th and 59th parallel. Unprecedented across Canada and in the records of the mountain pine beetle infestations of previous years. Again, when you look at it, the fiber production in Canada, we produce about 50% of the lumber, but we produce, all told, we produce just about 42% of all forest products in Canada come from British Columbia. And again, a big bulk of that material comes right in the mountain pine beetle infested areas. So we are dealing with some timber supply issues, and sawmills are feeling the hurt from the pine beetle. Again, a lot of it, they're still cutting gray trees, but they're not getting high quality lumber out of it anymore. So this is from Natural Resources Canada, and this is kind of where they put what happens. So in year 0, the green attack, in the summer, the tree dies. You'll start to see the pitch tubes, the needles will start to show like an off green or yellowish tinge almost immediately. That following spring, the leaves or needles will turn orange in year 1. And year 1 to 3, the needles will quickly turn to red following the attack, and needles will start to fall within 2 to 3 years. It should be noted that in 2006, 2007, we had some extended drought, and we were seeing this process sped up just because of drought conditions. Year 3 to 10, we get the needle fall at year 2 to 3. 3 to 10, we start to get small branch material falling, again, increasing the surface fuel loadings for sure. And we're now in year 10 to 20 where the dead bolls start to fall over. Again, we're not seeing huge areas of fall down, blow down yet, but we are starting to see areas where, we're getting complications of root rot, the actual material near the surface, the root collar starting to rot, some wind effect, and we're starting to see some material come down. And again, you can just imagine that it's not coming straight down to the ground with the amount of trees. A lot of these stands have somewhere between 1,200 to 1,500 stems per hectare. So still a well-stocked stand, and the trees are from a fire suppression side of things, it's pretty scary when you get into one of these stands, because when one tree falls, there's usually 2 or 3 other trees that are dependent on that, and you start to get quite a bit of fall down when you start burning around the roots of the trees. So when we had the red stage, we did see some larger fires, with very rapid rates of spread. It was, we akin it to standing grass, fires, large fires, fast moving across the landscape. Huge concerns with safety for firefighters. The fuel reacted very quickly to changes in relative humidity. It was so much that, you could have an RH of 35%, you could win. It was just a pretty docile surface fire till you hit 30%. The fire's up into the crowns, and with the low moisture content in the needles of the red needles, the trees, the crown fires were just ripping across the landscape. We did lose large tracts of timber to these fires. Again, a lot of the salvage logging took over. It's funny that mills will salvage burnt trees, but they really don't like it because they almost have to do nothing but burnt trees, and the chips from the slabs and other materials that they can't do, they can't send it to a pulp mill because they wouldn't be accepted, so it has to go to a cogen plant. So they would basically shut down their whole operation, bring in burnt material and saw it. The chip material would go to a different location. So it was quite a bit of work for sawmills, but they did do a lot of salvage logging. We're seeing very good regeneration response to those fires. The early fires, within 2 years, it almost looked like a green carpet underneath it. So, serotinous cones, they released a lot of seed, and the forest responded very well to those fires. Again, with the response of the infestation, industry responded very quickly, and I always said that the harvesting in BC from 2006 to 2007 led to a glut in the lumber market for sure. Within Prince George, in 2006, 2007, we were shipping out about 300 to 400 rail cars of lumber a day. So you can just imagine the amount of lumber that was going out of that area for sure. It was huge. To try to impact, or I guess we were trying to impact the spread of the beetle, but to dissalvage the material, we increased our annual allowable cut in a lot of areas. And what we did was we never really increased the allowable cut, but we allowed them to overrun with just sawing pine. So, if a company was willing to saw a higher percentage of pine and use mountain pine beetle dead pine, we would allow them to go over their allowable annual cut. Again, that led to industry harvesting so quickly that we were having huge post-harvest debris problems. In 2006, 2007, the pulp market was fluctuating quite a bit, so a lot of the pulp material was left in the forest. So we were left with a lot of slash loading post-harvest, and we're still dealing with that today. In the gray stage, we always talked about the red stage as being this big, scary thing, but it was very short-lived. We're now in the gray stage, and, we're starting to see various stages within that new fuel complex. We're seeing areas where we're getting a deciduous understory, the alder, willow, aspen starting to pop up underneath. We always called that, I call it the asbestos forest. It was a moisture site, so not a huge fire component or fire threat component that we had to deal with there. A lot of the area is very dry, so we see sparse understory. It's a dry, just herbaceous forest floor, but increased surface loading with the amount of twig material and seeing the tree fall down there. So we're starting to see that the increase in surface fires in those areas definitely went up. And then the ugly child that we have on the landscape is the conifer understory. We call it our midterm timber supply. Whether it's going to release and become a midterm timber supply, that's to be seen, but there are a lot of areas where we're seeing the understory release and starting to see, some leader growth of 12, 16 inches. So, I think it's viable material on a whole, and a lot of these stands will have anywhere from 600 to 800 stems per hectare. So, there is a viable forest underneath of it. So we'll see what happens in 20 to 40 years when the real crunch of that midterm timber supply happens. We're starting to see the fall down occur. Again, the sapwood rot in the lower portions of the tree, and seeing the drier surface fuels with the loss of that overstory shading. And we're looking at this as almost being standing slash. So, a lot of these materials have very little moisture in them. They're just bone dry, so pretty interesting. So again, here's just some graphics of what I was talking about, the varying stages. Again, that lush green herbaceous material, very low fire risk. Not a whole lot of understory present. We're seeing surface fires in here. They do have a faster rate of spread just due to the increased surface loading. There's a lot of fine twig material down. And again, a lot of these sites, very dry, not a lot of moisture occurs in these areas, and the bulk of the moisture is in snow. So through the summer, these are very dry and not seeing a lot of decomposition. And it's interesting that we had the attack from the 1980s that was less than 1 million hectares. We look at that, and you can still go into those areas. There's trees on the ground, and they still have fine branch material on it. So, not a lot of decomposition. So that material is going to be there for many, many years coming forward. And on the far right, the wild child, you see it. It has a huge conifer understory. From our perspective, we're seeing it's got good spacing, so there's good air movement through the stands. We're seeing very fast rates of spread, and with the dead material, the fine dead material down, hanging in those trees, we're seeing high spotting potential from these. It's pretty interesting that in low wind conditions, when we have fires in these areas, we're almost getting 360-degree spotting. And, as the wind increases, we're still seeing, almost 180-degree spotting potential. So, it's from a firefighting perspective, it's pretty scary. And from a fire propagation perspective, we're starting to see some long-range spotting that, are over, a mile, 2 miles. So, scary things from a firefighting perspective. Again, in the mountain pine beetle gray stage, we're observing more fuel being consumed, and a little later on I'll show you some pictures of actually the bole of the tree being consumed. At 3 to 5 meters off the ground, we're consuming boles. So, there's a huge amount of heat being generated there. Very high intensity fires gives us more convective lift. With the more convective lift, we're able to loft firebrands a little higher and more potential for horizontal drift. And again, with that more horizontal drift, we're seeing longer spotting distances. And again, our 400-meter, quarter of a mile spotting is almost commonplace now, and we're seeing spotting up to a mile and sometimes 2 miles, regularly as well. And again, with the loss of that overstory, a lot of the surface fuels that receive the spots are a little drier and more susceptible to starting spot fires. It's really interesting that, we're seeing in the green forest, it was always needles, bark flakes, and small twigs. And when we still had a lot of the trees now don't have any bark on it, but it was pretty interesting. In 2010, I was flying on a fire, and we were actually seeing huge pieces of bark being lofted and on fire up into the sky. So, fall cap sizes of bark on fire. So, a little heavier, a little harder to get it to drift downwind, but, at that short range spotting up to a quarter of a mile, there was a lot of material that was falling out of these fires. So it was pretty interesting from that perspective. Again, I don't want to point the finger at industry and say that they're bad, but a lot of material being left on site. And in BC, we have guidance where they're required to assess the post-hazard abatement things. So once they're done harvesting, they have to go back in and say that this is a fire hazard, and we will do something to mitigate it, or we see this as not being a fire hazard, and we're okay with leaving it behind. And again, we got a little soft on this, I would say, and I think we're starting this in 2014, 2015. We've seen fires in some of these cut blocks that were uncontrollable just because of the fire intensity and the amount of material that was being consumed. So I think we have to share responsibility with industry that they may have left the material behind, but we let them leave the material behind. So it's a bad news story from us from that perspective. Again, not a great picture here, but just using a protimeter. This is in a harvest block that was probably harvested about 3 weeks before I found this tree on the ground, and 10% moisture content. And when you look at kiln-dried lumber at 14%, we're starting to look at a forest that's standing kiln-dried lumber. So, huge amount of material that's available to burn. Again, this is probably a centimeter to a centimeter and a half in the tree, but we've done cookies where, at the dead core of the middle of the tree, we got 22, 24%. So, a lot of material that's available to burn. It can be, in the times of a forest fire, it can be one big campfire. Everything wants to burn, and everything can and will burn, given time. So again, just what we've seen, 2003, 2004 were kind of pre-beetle, and a lot of the area burnt there was kind of in our southern interior where the pine beetle hadn't affected yet. But 2003 was a watermark year for us because that was the year of the Kelowna wildfire, and we lost a lot of structures there. So, we burned a large amount of area, spent a lot of money, and really didn't fit well. 2006 was that first real start of the pine beetle flush. 2005, 2006, 2007, we've seen relatively normal or average years where we've seen probably a little more area burnt, and most of it was placed on the pine beetle. It was really interesting that we had one forest district that for 20 years previous to the pine beetle had burned about 5,000 hectares, so about 12,000 acres. In 1 year, they burnt 30,000 hectares, or about 75,000 acres in 1 year, and it was 2006. So, a huge increase in just one forest district in BC, right in the epicenter of the pine beetle attack. When you look at BC, I call it the terrible twos. Our fire years seem to follow in pairs. So 2003, 2004, 2009, 2010, 2014, 2015. And in 2016, right now we're at just over 1,000 fires and just over 100,000 hectares, so 250,000 acres. So that fits us right in the 20-year average, that green line we're rate and pace there. There's a lot of fire studies being done within BC, and they say by 2035 with climate change and the altered fuel complexes that we have on the landscape, that we'll probably be averaging more around the 250,000 hectare range. So, pretty scary amount of timber could be lost and ecosystems affected. So as part of our work on trying to figure out what was going to happen in the pine beetle, we partnered with industry and we came up with an experimental burn project, the Carrot Lake, which is southwest of Prince George. And we were given the green light to go out and do some experimental burning to try to figure out what was going on. So we started out in 2006 trying to capture the red attack. Again, that was very quickly passed through this area. This was very near the epicenter and of the beetle attack, and we lost the red attack very quickly. It was attacked in about 2005, and by 2006 we actually got to burn 2 plots. What we were trying to do there was trying to find a trigger where the fire went from being a docile fire to being a full-blown crown fire. So we got 2 burns off in 2006, and in 2007, pretty well en masse, just about every tree dropped its needles in this area. So, very quickly lost that red. Had to re-engineer the project to start to think about the gray attack. And in 2013, we tried. 2010, 2011 was a very wet year for us. 2012, we tried to burn, but in 2013, we got several more plots off. So we have some good data on the gray attack as well, and we're working on producing a paper on that as well. View to treat a plot, and again, what we did is we tried to simulate the fall down. So we went into the plots where there was a lot of standing timber, dead timber, and we actually did this plot as a 50% fall, so we actually went in and fell 50% of the material. Again, we didn't really we thought about doing pushover with machinery, but we just thought it would do too much damage to the stand to actually have some root ball exposed and try to simulate that blowdown effect. But we decided just to go with putting the gray material closer to the ground. And again, this was putting it to the ground. Due to safety concerns, we didn't want to leave anything hung up with going through to do measurements and everything else. So most of the material was brought to the ground, and again, this was a 50% fall. So basically, all green trees were left standing, and we went in and we fell 50% of the gray trees, the gray attack trees. And then we had fun and we burnt it. And again, if you look at this picture, look at the 2 pictures, you'll see that a lot of material was consumed for sure. Within this, we had the temperature profile, so we had a lot of thermocouples established throughout it, depth of burn pins, so it was a full-blown experiment. So in the control plot, you look at it, and an average residence time of the fire was about 6 minutes. in a thin where we brought, and this thin plot was 25% of the trees were felled, but the residence time, again, 90 degrees Celsius or higher, was about 20 minutes. So, from a site degradation perspective, a huge amount of material and, huge fire intensity increase there for quite a long time. So it was pretty interesting to see that. Although the flaming front really didn't increase that much, it did increase a little bit at the residence time that we recognized, a huge increase in that. It's interesting that Parks Canada did a burn down in the southeast part of BC, and they had some resident times that were higher than 20 minutes. But they had the recent beetle attack as well as the old beetle attack. So you can see that the resident time for flaming or site degradation is increasing quite considerably. Again, pretty small font here, but this the pre-burn fuel loading and the post-burn fuel loading. You'll see that we were removing somewhere from 37% to almost 46% of the material was being removed. Really interesting when you go in and do the post-burn plots that, again, using just the no-go gauge, that a lot of the material that was 7 centimeters plus, so 3 inches in diameter and greater in the plots, was being removed as well. So, a huge amount of material was being consumed. And basically everything less than 7 centimeters was consumed. So huge amount of material being consumed, and, the plots weren't that big. The control, most plots were about a hectare to 1.5 hectares in size, so 2.5 to 4 hectares in size, or 4 acres in size, excuse me, and we were dividing those in two. So the control was anywhere from 1.5 acres to 2 acres in size, and the treated was 1.5 acres to 2 acres in size as well. So not huge plots. A line ignition, just using hand torches. So it wasn't like we were using a terra torch and throwing a lot of heat at it. We would just bring a small windrow of material in and light that. And so, we weren't really putting a lot of heat to the fire, and a lot of material was being consumed. So we started to try to quantify fire behavior. And, in the early days, I wouldn't say it was a guess, but it wasn't really an educated guess. It was, based on experience, in these conditions, last month I seen this, so, I suspect that we're going to see this or greater. So the interesting perspective, from being an on-the-ground fire behavior analyst, I was using the American system, I was using the Canadian system, I was using Dana's system. So, we tried to grab everything we could, and at the end of the day, we came up and we produced a paper on the red attack. And again, it's for that mountain pine beetle 1 to 5 years post-attack. And basically what we seen was the higher rate of spread. It was about 2.5 to 3 times higher. So we settled on 2.7%, or 2.7 times faster than the unaffected or green pine stands. So again, that lodgepole pine stand that the beetle was attacking, and most times it's a relatively docile fire stand. We do get fires in it. They're not, not anything big or scary, but when we started to see the pine beetle attack, we were seeing, rates of spread 2.7 times faster. And, from a perspective of initial attack and sustained attack on these fires, it was a huge concern, and we've seen large tracts of land being destroyed. Here's a picture from a 2009 wildfire, and you'll actually see down here where you're actually seeing the bole of the tree being consumed. It was interesting that this stand was attacked in 1980 with about 25% of the trees being affected, and the trees over time did fall down, again in a very very dry ecosystem, and a lot of slash type material or dead tree material on the ground. And the pine beetle hit it in 2006, 2007, and we were lucky enough that Brad Hawks from Natural Resources Canada had done plots in it in the 80s, and we were able to go back and do some sleuthing and see exactly what had actually happened. He had the data from the 1980 attack, pre-attack and post-attack, and it was very interesting from that perspective. But you'll see that in this picture that the bole of the tree is part of the fire. Everything climbed up, and again, there was still bark material on here as well. So we had that. We've seen rates of spread of 18 meters a minute, and that would have been in green pine. It probably would have been 5 or 6 meters a minute. So definite increase. Again, part of that, we were seeing very high intensity and very severe burn severity on the landscape. We call this the Lava Canyon moonscape now. So if anybody's looking to do a movie of the moon, it's a good place to do one. So very high intensity fires. So we started to deal with a lot of issues, and the biggest thing we had to do was manage the hype that, we were telling people that, the red pine beetle attack stands, the red attack was bad, and, we needed to make sure people were aware of it and being able to get out of the way. So we had to manage our self-inflicted hype, I would call it, but, we did it because there was huge fighter safety concerns. We were unaware, or we were scared of what we were seeing on the land base, and we were scared of what the firefighters were having to deal with. Where do you safely put firefighters when a fire is going 3 times faster than you expect it to go? So, a lot of material being consumed. Can't get crews near it. A lot of indirect attack, dealing with long-range spotting. So all those things that we had to deal with. Right now, there's a need to develop and quantify a fuel model for fire behavior predictions in the gray stage. We're probably, I would say, probably a year away from launching a paper on that, hopefully, given that everybody seems to be doing it off the corner of the desk, but we'll be working towards that. Again, we had to manage that self-imposed type of the potential fire behavior in this fuel type. And again, there's a lot of people that are playing off of that. I can cut down all your trees and then you don't have to worry about, fire in your area. But, there's still a lot of other values on the landscape that we're trying to promote and maintain. There was a huge push to remove all gray stands. And forest industry's done a very good job of working with us, in areas where we deem that there's a high fire threat. They're working to remove as much material out of that area as possible, and again, get it back to a productive green growing stand. Again, is the gray stage worse than the green forest? From a fire spread potential, it's marginally worse. From a fire intensity perspective, it's a lot worse. So we need to ensure that that if a fire does go through an area, and again we're realizing this from prescribed burning, that we're trying to do a good thing for the land base by doing some prescribed burning, but if we're doing site degradation, we're not doing it. We're actually doing a bad thing. So trying to manage that. From a biodiversity, our ecologists are saying that after the mountain pine beetle attack, the biodiversity in the stands is increasing exponentially. So the biodiversity side of things, with all the dead material down, biodiversity seems to be increasing. I'm in a conference right now, and I heard a wildlife biologist talk yesterday about our ungulate population, deer, elk, moose. They're really getting really getting hammered because of, the impacts to their travel quarters by dead trees falling down. So, there is some concerns with them as well. We're trying to rectify that, but it's not something that can happen overnight. Critically dry fuels, standing material and down material at 6 to 8%. That's kind of the worst case scenario. We're seeing a lot of 10 to 20% moisture content of standing wood and down wood. So huge effect there from that perspective. And the convective energy, the spotting potential, the increased distance and size of those. So huge concerns. What's the future of fire in the mountain pine beetle stand? Seeing it a lot, I still shrug my shoulders and say, I think we're still going to see new things every day, but we haven't seen the blowdown or fall down at any huge level yet. And when we do, how are we going to deal with fire in those areas? It's pretty well going to be indirect attack. We're going to fall back to some type of a break, and we're probably going to be doing a lot of burning. And in those conditions, what are we going to do from the site degradation side of things? And we've got a huge reforestation program in wildfires now. I don't know if we start to get large fires and we've really done damage to the site, that they're going to be able to be planted for many years. So that could be a concern for sure. The timber supply demand, again, we're just on the cusp now. Had a recent announcement where one of our timber supply areas where the AAC has gone down, which means mills will be losing production, which means loss of jobs and loss of community. We have a lot of communities. The Conference of the Mountain right now, the minister said that we have 140 communities that are forestry dependent in BC. So that's a huge concern for everybody. Again, we've seen that increased post-harvest fuel loading, and again, the picture in this slide shows you that this area has been harvested, and a huge amount of material, unmerchantable material left behind. Climate change, or my favorite term, climate confusion. Where is that going to put us in the future? What's it going to do? Right now, we have a spruce bark beetle that's impacting our spruce. So every pine tree has been more or less affected by the pine beetle, and now we have a spruce beetle. So and they're harvesting as quick as they can to eradicate that beetle as well. So climate change. I've always said that if you're a beetle, come to BC because we have everything good to eat here. Prescribed burning, broadcast burning. Industry is starting to lose that ability. They used to do a lot of broadcast burning post-harvest, and they're not the old guys with gray hair are disappearing, and the young kids coming on haven't been mentored. And even within our branch, our wildfire branch, we're starting to see a huge loss in our burning skills. So that's something that we're working on. From a liability perspective, industry is scared to put fire into this material because when they light a fire, they're responsible for where the fire would go. So if you have people that aren't experienced and the fire gets away from them, we would be charging industry for any lost standing timber. So huge impact from their perspective. We have been working on trying to limit that liability, but with no avail yet. We're starting to really start to look at proactive fuel breaks. A lot of districts, are widening their roads for fuel breaks and trying to maintain those roads at a wider, the right of way at a wider distance that we're able to use as fuel breaks. But again, there's only so many roads on the land base, so we need to start doing some more proactive work. So where do we go from here? And this is one of my favorite pictures because you see foreground, you see dead trees, red trees, green trees. Then there's this plantation, and again, usually was attacking a mature pine tree, but in our case, we started to see, I said that we got rid of the pine beetle because we starved it to death, but it actually started to attack plantations that were 20 to 25 years old. So as you go towards the background, that plantation, you'll see that it does have some mountain pine beetle in it as well. So we did lose a lot of younger stands that were considered to be untouchable by the pine beetle, but they found their way in there. There was just so many beetles that they just attacked it. They couldn't overwinter or produce. They could produce eggs in there, but they wouldn't be able to. The eggs wouldn't prosper because of the cold, and they would actually kill the eggs. So it wasn't an area where we were seeing them propagate, but definitely in the summertime they could go in and kill stands very quickly. So where do we go from here? Who knows? It's going to be an interesting future. I'd like to thank Amanda and the North Atlantic group for inviting me, and I'll open the floor up to questions.
All right, Dana, thank you very, very much for that presentation. We had a question come in the chat box, and I encourage folks to type more questions in. We'll start with the chat box, and maybe in 10 minutes or so, we might be able to open up the phone lines. So the first question that came in is, what kind of woody invasive plant species replaces your understory with the alder and willow and aspen? Susan says, we have issues with dogwood and sumac here in Kansas.
We're not seeing that many invasive species. Alder and willow, aspen seem to be, the main ones. We are seeing some of the herbaceous stuff. It was always present in the stands. It just seems to be flourishing. We're not seeing many invasives at all. And again, a lot of the ecosystems that the pine beetle attack would be a cool, dry ecosystem, a cool, moist ecosystem, and a cool, wet ecosystem. So, it's an area that, we're kind of in the middle of BC where we get, we have with climate change, we're seeing relatively mild winters. In the 80s, it wasn't uncommon to see, minus 30, minus 40 through the winter, and that was good to kill the pine beetle. But, basically we're seeing a lot warmer winters now with a lot of snow. So it seems best described as a cool, moist ecosystem, and yeah, we're not seeing many invasives at all.
All right. Thank you. Susan has another question. She says, between green and red states, in what manner do the affected trees ignite?
In the red stage, it again, being standing grass, not a lot of the stands had some pretty good surface fuel loading. They would ignite, reach that critical surface intensity very quickly. And again, the moisture content, Matt Jolly's done a lot of great work around the moisture content in the pine beetle affected needles, and, down to the needles having, 10 to 12% moisture content. So, it almost seemed to be, and anecdotally, we had some descriptions of independent crown fires where spotting material would actually fall into the crowns, ignite, and go. But again, I don't think it was, we were seeing, huge flaming fronts, independent crown fires, but we were definitely seeing the crowns, the ability for the crowns to ignite were a lot quicker. With the gray stage, again, we have to remember that the bulk of the stands were probably moderately impacted. So we're still seeing, when I talked about the 12 to 1,500 stems per hectare, probably 50 to 60% of those stems were impacted. So there's still a lot of green material in those stands, green pine and spruce as well. Even in our pure pine stands, there's still a 10 to 15% spruce content. So the big thing in the gray stage is when we get that understory, and that understory is really flourishing. The crown base height on a lot of that understory is, 2 to 3 feet. So, we've got the surface fuels increased because of the fine twig material that's down. So a surface fire can impact the understory very quickly, and then continue up into the dead gray material and into the green overstory as well. And pretty interesting fire behavior. It seems to impact almost quicker into the crowns in the gray stage in a lot of stands. But again, you have to really look at it, what is the understory structure before you start to get hugely scared at it. And we're trying to actually map that with LiDAR now, and it's a huge task.
Wow. So we have another question. Is the 2.7 times increased rate of spread primarily driven by spotting and spot fire growth, or is the main flame front showing that increased spread rate?
It's the main flaming front is increasing by that amount. And again, that was in the red stage. And again, the spotting, the long range spotting, it wasn't impacting the flaming front. We were actually having, 10 to 15 acre fires out in front of the flaming front. So it was a messy landscape when we had a wildfire for sure.
It was. I'll just add as a sort of a footnote that last week at the Atlantic Forest Fire Managers meeting, Bill DeGroot, who works on the CAN fire behavior model, ran the model for eastern fuels and in Beetle, in forest self-affected stands. And he also came up with that same, kind of 2.7 times the expected rate of spread in dead material versus live. So it's definitely something that we need to be thinking about in this neck of the woods as well. Dead wood is dead wood. Let's see. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. The interesting thing we did is we tried to increase our initial attack capacity. We went to medium helicopters where we would put 2 IA crews on it, double the amount of equipment, and we had limited success. When you start to think about a fire going 2.5 to 3 times faster, can you get to the fire 2.5 or 3 times faster using the equipment that we use? We can't. You can only drive a truck so fast. You can only fly a helicopter so fast. We even went to some areas, toyed around with the idea of doing heavy lift helicopters and to get IA crews to a fire, but very quickly, they're very limited to where they can land, so it didn't happen. And even with a medium helicopter, we found that we couldn't, we weren't getting there any faster. And when we did get there, we didn't have the punch to do anything with it. And we increased our tanker fleet, the size of our tanker fleet, and we still were losing. Well,
definitely things to be aware of. We have another question. How did the standing dead behavior compare to the post-harvest splash? We have very little harvest here in New Jersey, for example, so it probably won't be an issue.
It's a totally different animal. When it takes time when it's standing, there is that increased fire intensity, but it's on a longer term. When it's down on the ground and the slash loading, we had a fire in 2015 in a lot of the mountain pine beetle slash, and it was just amazing that we were consuming a lot more material. It was almost a viewer's paradise for fire whirls. I mean, there were so many fire whirls occurring on the site, and picking up large material, and the whirls are picking up large material, picking up poles of trees that were left on site, and some of those were 15, 20 feet in length, and actually the fire whirls picking those up. We had a fire, and it was probably on about a 200-acre cut block, and at one time I had 3 different fire whirls going, just because of the pure intensity of the surface fire in the slash. So it was scary, and to come back the next morning, you see this at 6 or 7 o'clock at night. The next morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, you get up, and next thing you've got like 12 spot fires away from the flaming front, and some of them are 20, 30 acres in size, and how does that happen? Well, I think the bulk of it was from fire whirls. So just that extreme fire behavior that comes with that increased intensity is really scary for me.
It was. Well, maybe on a related note, another question is, were you actually seeing 1,000-hour fuels contributing to fire behavior, or were there reasons for the increased residence time, or both?
I think it's more in the resident time. Again, the flaming front, I don't think we see that much of an increase in the resident time of that flaming front. It seems to be going, maybe the depth of the flaming front is a little deeper, but I think a lot of the 1,000-hour fuels kind of contribute to that at that actual residence time. And again, going back to that Carrot Lake stuff, it was amazing that our plots, we burn our plots in like 15, 20 minutes, and the walk through and just to the pure heat, trying to walk through those areas of just the material being consumed and coming back the next morning to just white ash. So, I think a lot of the 1,000-hour fuels don't contribute that much to the flaming front. I think maybe a little increase in depth, probably in the 100-hour fuels, may present a little add to the flaming front, but it's that 1,000-hour fuels and the site degradation that we really seen that was really interesting.
Wow. Thanks. Let's see. We'll give folks another minute to type questions into the chat box. Sometimes we have a little delay as folks are thinking of questions and typing before they hit enter. After a minute, we might open up the phone lines to let folks ask a question out loud. We'll give folks just another maybe 20 seconds or so to type another question in. All right. Well, I'm going to open up the phone lines. If the noise gets too bad, I'll mute them again, and we might wrap up early. But let me unmute the phone lines, and we'll see if we have questions from folks on the phone. All right. I have unmuted the phone lines. Does anybody out there have a question for our webinar presenter, for Dana Hicks? I hope I unmuted the phone lines.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, this is Inga Lapuma. I guess I'm just wondering if you have any recommendations for people in the Northeast U.S., for example, that are encountering new areas of southern pine beetle damage that may not have seen fire in quite a while, or they have, but they just haven't seen the combination of the two in their area. And just, recommendations as to what to look out for and what to be careful of, and, considering we're in a very highly populated area.
Well, I'd say the first thing is, it's all about firefighter safety. We seem to drag our feet on that a little bit, and I think some guys got in some scary situations. So, it's no longer, a green stand. The things that you did in a green stand, change your tactics. Instead of going in and going towards the head of the fire, anchor in at the back and start flanking the fire. You're just putting yourself at risk. And from a community perspective, Fire Smart, or in your guys' case, Firewise, get people prepared, because, these fires move so quickly that you can barely get mobilized before you could be impacting homes or structures. So, we did, our self-imposed height, but, I think it's a well-placed self-imposed height, and, honesty is a good thing. Just tell people these fires are moving so quickly that we may not be able to, get a handle on them before they're at your doorstep. And, be prepared, because, it's, the old wily veterans, we had a lot of people that, the old gray-haired guys that were gruff and said they could put fire out anywheres, they were left scratching their head. So, that's the biggest thing is, try to be calm, cool, and collective, but, these fires have the potential to move and propagate by spotting that much quicker. And, when we're looking at populated areas, it's that spotting that you really need to be aware of, because it's scary when you start to watch this material spot. It's very quick for sure. And, again, given given climate change, I think we're going to see more extreme events, maybe more drought events, and areas where fire wasn't really that scary before could become very scary. I know Nova Scotia, I think I see Scott's on the line here. They got a pretty good fire season this year, and I think they've seen some things that they had never seen before. So it's and again, it doesn't have to be a big fire. It's great to talk about being on a big fire, but it's those small fires in the wrong place that are the most scariest.
Well, wise words. We're just after the hour. I think several folks might need to jump off. So before, we can take a couple more questions over the phone line. But I just wanted to make sure to extend a thank you from all of our participants and from the North Atlantic Fire Science Exchange for your presentation and for your words of wisdom here at the end. Anyone else on the phone line give questions for our presenter? This is your last chance.
And my email is there. If you get a question at a later date, you want to email me. My email box or my mailbox fills up very quickly. So if you don't get an immediate response, don't get mad at me, but I'll try to get back to you for sure.
All right. Dana, thank you so much. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.